was like, if I read more of this, I won't like comic books anymore. And I can't risk that.
So, things
I
are
hope
heating
that's
up
how
in the
we
Tokyo Ghoul
start.
fandom. That is actually how it starts.
Perfect. This month, we are talking about Tokyo Ghoul, which I need to pull up the author's name so I can read it.
We're not good at the Japanese names, which is going to become a real problem in just a moment when we have to remember 40 Japanese names.
I cannot.
It's not going to happen to you.
And it is basically, I'm going to give a brief synopsis because we don't want to do as much of like a plot breakdown as we did last time. So, brief synopsis. This is the story of Ken Kaneki, a basically our age nobody dude. You know, classic manga start there. You get a male protagonist. He's not very interesting. He's thrust into a very interesting world when he is caught up in an accident with a ghoul. Now, ghouls are a race that lives side by side with humans, and they hunt and feed on humans, basically, and humans don't like that. So he gets in an accident with a ghoul while it was trying to eat him. He gets some of its organs transplanted in him, making him a human ghoul hybrid, and therefore the perfect stand-in for us into what ensues is his introduction to the world of ghouls and basically his abandoning his humanity about halfway through, and then shit hits the fan. And
Dallas, I think we lost you for a second, but I choose to believe this is actually a story about veganism because he's a vegan.
That's basically how this story goes. Man.
Dallas, you cut out there.
You're really choppy.
That's a good way to see this. That's okay. That's okay. I'm gonna say about this. So it might be good if I just glitch out all the time. Oh, okay. Jacob's not gonna be here. Outstanding. So the guy that picked this isn't gonna be here with us. So we're gonna dunk on his pick this entire time.
It's quality programming.
Beautiful.
Well, this may be a much shorter episode than we thought because our person who's like, I like the story is gone, and the rest of us are like, do we like the story? And Dallas, as you may have heard, did not like this story.
Can we start talking about it? Like, George, do you want to go first?
I think we're just going to say it's spoilers. Let's just talk a lot about Tokyo Ghoul here.
Okay.
All right, George, you go first.
So I want to say that I really did enjoy Tokyo Ghoul at the beginning. Like, it's a really cool concept, a really interesting world that they throw you into, and I think it's relatable enough that we could like put ourselves in the character's shoes, right? But like, and I feel like that's the case for the first, I don't know, half of it. I don't know exactly what chapter it was, but eventually it just falls downhill when our main character just becomes super unrelatable and not really likable, in my opinion.
You mean when he gets white hair, right?
Yeah,
there's a very clear delineation.
White hair.
There's black hair and white hair, and we don't like white hair.
Yeah.
Well, he gets tortured for a while, and
screw you and your white hair.
Yeah, he gets basically caught up in the ghoul mafia, and one guy really likes to torture people, and he tortures our main character, and he goes crazy, and he gets really strong, but becomes unrelatable because how can I relate to someone who's been tortured to the point of madness?
I can relate to that after reading Tokyo Ghoul.
Yeah. Also, it makes perfect sense.
I feel like if that was the goal, it's kind of like Uncut Gems, where they're like, we're going to make a movie that makes you feel stressed and uneasy the whole way through, because that's how the main character feels. Tokyo Ghoul's like, we're going to torture you to the point of madness. And that's what the last 70 chapters of Tokyo Ghoul were.
See, but it's not even the same thing, because after he got tortured, he magically was like super powerful. Unless you're hiding something from me.
No, I've lost my love for the graphic medium.
I didn't understand that.
See, it's funny because I actually thought that moment was a lot more interesting than you guys. I have a little bit of a different problem with it because I feel like it started off this really interesting story where it's like you got this ghoul and he's got to be like, oh, I now want to eat people, but I understand who people are because I actually am a person and I don't want my friends to die. And just trying to like balance those two worlds. And it's this really interesting thing. And somebody wants to eat him and he has these confrontations with other ghouls. And it's really cool. My problem was like they kept expanding the world and it was about things I didn't care about. It was like, let's say you just made like Star Wars Episode 4 and it was fantastic, the best story that's ever come out. Then you're like, okay, we're making a sequel. And then like the first 50 minutes of it is just like Death Star being rebuilt and just like stormtroopers doing nothing. And you're like, okay, I don't quite understand or care about these characters, but they keep coming up and I guess I should relate with them. But then you keep killing them and I still don't care about them. And so now we've got like two sides of this thing. And it felt like it just
That was
expanded.
the prequels. That was the prequels to the Star Wars movies.
But see, the prequels are actually decent and had characters that you did care about.
Let's not turn this into the Star Wars podcast.
Yeah, let's talk about Tokyo Ghoul.
But I'm just saying, like, they like brought the whole investigator thing in and turned it into like this two-sided thing, and I was like, this is not what I came here for. But okay, thanks for switching the story out on me.
It's like they want me to care about the investigators as much as I care about the main character, it seemed like, and I just didn't. They had, I mean, they all seemed pretty cookie cutter investigators. Like there was one or two interesting ones, but they get killed off anyway.
Yeah, they killed all the cool ones.
Yeah, like what was his name? Motto?
Motto was cool.
Yeah, he was really neat and like he had a cool little niche about him, and then they kill him off.
Yeah.
He's
Can
dead.
anybody tell me how to say Kinch, Chink, Quinch, Quinka?
Kinke is how I
Kink
pronounce
is how
it.
I thought it was
Kink,
yeah.
pronounced.
That's weird.
Kinda like
Just be
kinky,
like,
but-
everybody has a unique kinky.
Everybody's got their own kinks.
And I never said that out loud. I didn't understand how weird it was.
Everybody's got their own special kink. Okay, there's all sorts of. There's just so many unique kinks. I feel like my experience, to continue building off what T was just saying, I feel like it's as if they took 40 minutes in the middle of one of the Star Wars movies to tell me about all the different colors of lightsabers and like what they meant. And while that's something really interesting to read in like the Star Wars visual dictionary, in your prime time storytelling, do not stop the pacing to explain to me what all the weird tendrils coming out of the back of the ghouls meant. I could have gone the whole story, man, like, oh, they're all unique and crazy. But instead I had to read like 6 straight chapters of like, this one is this hard, and this one is this hard, this one is strong against this one. I'm like, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
where's this
all
going?
the Pokemon matchups.
For real, it was a Pokemon flowchart.
I know.
We
Also-
wish Pokemon was
also
that simple.
Japanese, like with these weird names. So like if you're an English listener, like I don't know, if you're not familiar with Japanese, it was really rough to go through. It was really dense, and you don't know what any of these different words are, and you can't remember any of them. So like I can't even tell you which one's which. But yeah, it was.
I can remember that the organs are called kagunes, and there's like 3 or 4 of them, and I can't remember any of what they're called. 4?
I literally, as I was reading it, I felt my brain making the decision to not store that information. Like,
Oh, me
against
too.
my will. I was reading it and I was like, okay, we're going to really try. And it was almost like my brain was like, no, we're not. I was like, no, I want to be informed. It's like, shut up. No, we don't care. We need to remember every Spider-Man girlfriend. We can't remember these tendrils. And I'm like, okay,
Priorities.
fair trade.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know. It was just like there was that. It was so disjointed from the rest of the story that my mind skipped over it to the next panel just automatically. And if I wanted to, it was like reading a textbook. I'm like, okay, I got to really sit here and focus on this if I want to get the information down.
Need like a
It reminded-
notepad by you.
It reminded me a lot of my experience with Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. So I loved Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. T recommended it to me. And I was like, oh man, Man in the High Castle, that sounds like such an interesting premise. Like, what if the paradigm of World War II was flipped, right? The U.S. lost. And the book was so good for like the first half. And then I realized that I only liked it because it was an interesting world. There wasn't any story. It had legs up to about chapter 70, where I was like, what an interesting world. And then everything past that, I was like, I don't care about anyone here. I don't even know what The story is supposed to be this conflict doesn't draw me in, and that was kind of a sad place to realize because like I wanted to like it so much, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to dislike it. I didn't want it to be bad. It was interesting at first. I just lost me.
Yeah, and I feel like part of that was just like the pacing of it wasn't the greatest, you know? Because in the first few arcs, it's like, what if some ghoul tries to eat his friend and he has to save him? How does he come to terms with this? What if there's a different crazy ghoul that wants to eat him because he's half ghoul, half human? What if he has to like learn to befriend the people that used to be bad because they're all trying to figure out how to live in society? And then it like went from that to like, what if there's a giant war of ghouls and a giant ghoul organization? And what if there's a bunch of conspiracy? And what if there's a bunch of investigators and a hierarchy? And you have to know all the hierarchy and the characters that you don't care about and the ones that you do. And how do they fit? And what's their ranking? And what do their kagunes do? And it just seemed like it tried to expand before it had the foundation laid. You know, where it's like, it almost like introduced 3 arcs at the exact same time. And so it was really hard to stick with it.
Yeah, I think that all kind of culminates to the very end of this part of Tokyo Ghoul that we read, because there's like follow-up series that like go on and they explain it, but at the very end of the manga, like there's this big battle and you're just like, oh, how is this all going to turn out? And like people are dying and you're like, what side's going to turn out? And then there's just a bunch of unanswered questions. And I didn't know there was follow-up series, so I just ended it and I had to reread it like 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, no, it was really that underwhelming. That
Oh yeah, I was pissed when I finished it. I was like, what? What?
I literally texted all of you guys right as I finished it, and I was pissed. I was like, this is the worst. Why did I read 120 so chapters of this?
Oh, it was 143.
It was 143. It's been
I
a
won't let
while,
you
and
shave
I
those
pushed
extra
it all out
23.
there.
Put a pencil in my eyeball. I think Jacob sensed that none of us liked it, and that's why he's not here. His spidey senses tingled. He's like, ooh, they're going to talk bad about my manga I like.
He's
Okay,
gonna have to defend himself.
so here's a question though, because you guys didn't like the chapter 76 thing, and I actually felt like that was kind of a cool moment.
Oh, I thought it was a cool moment. I just
yeah.
hated everything that came after it because of that moment. Like
Yeah,
it was
I'm
a
in the
really
exact same
cool.
boat.
It looked really cool visually. I thought it was really cool story-wise, but then I feel like everything past it was ruined because of that moment.
Yeah, I am honestly in the same boat. I liked everything through that. And then after that, didn't care.
Personally, what I didn't like about that was that, like, I don't know. I don't feel like that made a ton of sense. How like that torture just made him like, I don't know, like a rank-esque ghoul or whatever to like kill off his. Because like he was kind of a wimp before that. He was like getting stronger slowly, and like that made sense to me. Like he was able to like read books and learn things off of that. But then all of a sudden, just having tortured, he's like this ridiculously strong ghoul. That I didn't jive with that.
Okay,
I didn't get his motivation.
For those
Sorry,
of
go
you
ahead.
who are listening along, chapter 76 is the point in the story where he gets kidnapped by this really powerful, awful ghoul who named himself Jason after the movie's serial killer. And Jason takes him and just tortures him because Ken's Kagune heals himself really fast. So he can like almost kill him, but he won't quite die because he heals so quickly. It just goes on for weeks, for a long time, and
Buckets of cut off fingers.
Yeah, and then the interesting moment is he's just sitting there like, why am I suffering so bad? What's wrong? And the ghoul that tried to eat him, who is implanted in him, he like has a vision of her, and she's like, okay, why are you the way that you are? And they have this interesting conversation where he tells a story about his mom and says, oh, my mom was always giving to the people around her, and she helped her sister and her sister's family, and she worked so hard to take care of me and her sister's family to the point that she worked herself to death. And so I always want to be there for the people around me. And this imaginary ghoul is kind of like, you don't have the power to do anything. And your mom was really selfish and like wouldn't take care of you or take care of her own needs because she was so willing to be giving that she just killed herself. And that's not valuable. And I felt like that was a really, really interesting quandary, and I really loved that moment. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about it.
I did kind of like that because like I can see that happening in the real world. Like, people care too much about others that like they let themselves basically drown in all the having to take care of others first. And I think that is like an important lesson to teach that like you can't help others if you can't help yourself. You can't put somebody else's oxygen mask on if you don't have your own on. That's what they teach you every time when you go ride a plane. But like, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I liked that. I liked the lesson. Um, I don't know why that kind of turned into him having white hair and like being a badass all of a sudden, like with all this extra strength and whatnot. But I did like that story and that lesson.
That's what therapy does to you, actually. If you go to therapy and you work through trauma, your hair goes white and you get superpowers.
Wow.
Look, T has the palest hair. He's done it the most.
And I've probably done the most therapy.
He's done the most therapy. His hair turned white. I did a little bit of therapy. I didn't do enough to turn my hair white. So
You just bleached it for a little bit, then went back.
yeah, that was about the same time I was going to therapy. I didn't realize those things were connected.
Man, if I got therapy for all the stuff I do in chemical engineering, like it would just be bright white, like it'd be glowing.
George would be a Super Saiyan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But something I want to talk about a little bit. Like, do you feel like we covered that enough, or do you want to keep talking
Well, I
about
just
it?
kind of wanted to mention that because that's kind of like an archetypal story, and so that's why it has that thing. Is like when a person decides, okay, being weak is not a virtue, and I think being nice is a virtue, but we kind of like act like it's a value, but like when life really hits, it's not, and you kind of have to be a powerful person for the people around you. And so I guess that moment when he decided, okay, I'm not going to be weak and I'm not just going to take this and I'm going to stand up for myself has a lot of personal power. And yeah, you may think like he shouldn't have won that fight against a really powerful ghoul, but it is just the fact that there is power in deciding to be strong. So I really liked that theme there.
I agree. I feel like if the story ended right there, I would have been like, Tokyo Ghoul, really cool. I liked that. That was a cool story. How neat. It was just like everything that came after. Sort of like poison that first half.
It's
It's
like
like if you're eating like a really delicious burrito and then you get to the halfway point and then there's just like a mouse that's in the middle of it for the rest of it.
Oh.
You're like, I ate half of this. There's a mouse in here. I ate half of it. Did I eat any mouse? And you're like, I'm pretty sure I didn't eat any mouse. But I can't be sure. There's a lot of mouse in there. And they're like, you find it tail first, and there's like a little bit of tail missing off it. You're like, I did. There's evidence that I got a little mouse in there. That's kind of how Tokyo Ghoul feels.
Yeah.
Or I guess for Tokyo Ghoul, it'd be like a human finger.
Mm-hmm.
Gross.
So burrito would be better. But I feel like the message was a good tea that you're talking about. I just don't feel like it really empowered him after killing that powerful ghoul to really do something that I really got the point of. Again, like I don't think I related to him that much. I'm like, I get the message you're trying to go for here, but like everything you do past this, I can't relate to. I don't know why, this series of events led you to be this. You have your weird moral justice that you need to go and fulfill in society, and never clicked. It just never clicked for me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I feel like part of that was kind of supposed to be like the next character development arc, because they do mention that later, where it's like he's out there being crazy and doing all these crazy things to save everybody around them. And somebody's like, you realize you're still just being selfish because you're scared to lose the people around you. And you're still kind of doing this exact thing of serving everybody else at your own detriment.
Mhm.
And so I like wonder if there will be more of a conclusion on that, but it's kind of like when you've got 70 chapters worth of unfinished character that makes you uncomfortable, it is really hard to read.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is like this is kind of going off on a tangent away from the story. But what did you guys think about the art style? It was a lot different than My Hero Academia, and I just didn't really like the fighting. Like I just thought there was big black streaks across my page, and I'm like, what's going on? I feel like this is what like I was watching a Transformers movie, and it just looks like two dumpsters or like garbage trucks just bashing into each other. That's kind of how I felt with the ghoul fights.
For all of us visual listeners, I'm about to demonstrate to you what I think, how I felt about the action sequences in this. All right, so I promise, me and JP are doing something so cool back here. You cannot believe how cool the things that are going on are. Boy, man, we're doing crazy stuff.
Don't say it
Who's
like
winning?
that.
Who's winning? I can't see. Who's winning?
You would never believe. Well, oh man, now my Kagune's this shape. Oh man, you don't even need to know about that. That's how I felt about the action all the time. So I was like, oh no, but then I have to like move this, and then we're in a freeze frame that you don't understand, and then it's back to this. There's just like there was no good. The fight choreography was poor. I didn't feel like they conveyed movement very well throughout the storyline.
I feel like it. I mean, I can see how it'd be really difficult the way that they chose to do it because like everybody's Kagunes looks pretty much the same, and so to kind of just display that in black and white, I can see how that'd be really hard. I feel like I don't know, I haven't really watched the anime, but I feel like it could be a pretty cool looking action anime, but like in manga, just drawing it, it all looks the same. It all just looks like a 2-year-old got a pencil and scribbled all over the pages and stuff. It all looks the same.
Which is too bad because there are like a lot of really cool moments. Like when you see, what's the friend's name that works at the shop? When her like, who's the rabbit?
Toka?
Okay.
Yeah, Toka. Like when her wings first come out and you like see her attack somebody, you're like, oh shoot, this is gonna be cool. But it has a hard time delivering on that. But there are a ton of cool moments like that. Like when you see Kaneki's mask for the first time, you like almost get chills because it's impactful.
Mm-hmm.
But
Not gonna lie, that's one thing I did enjoy of the manga is like all the different masks and kind of like the culture of the ghouls. Like I thought that was pretty cool.
First half, interesting as heck. Interesting as heck. I like the gourmet story arc was great. I thought that was so interesting. The whole like ghouls have a gladiator thing where they eat the people at the end. Sure, that's wacky and crazy. I like that. You touched on a point that I wanted to make a little bit. Like, I felt like there was so much visual storytelling I was supposed to understand that wasn't conveyed well. Where like one of the big typifiers of a ghoul is that their eyes are red. And I tried to explain to my wife that, and she went, "Isn't this a black and white book?" And I went, "Yes." And she went, "Then how do you really know?" And I was like, "Well, sometimes they're like all black." And she's like, "And that means red?" And I'm like, "Yes." She's like, "So what are those color of those tentacles?" I was like, "I can only assume red or black. That's what I've been shown here, you know?" And I don't expect on a weekly schedule, I couldn't create one of those 20-page chapters, draw it, and color it, you know? I do not expect manga to be in color. If you want to make one of your main points that their eyes are red, maybe a black and white format isn't the key. You know what I mean? It almost reminded me of one of my favorite jokes from Scott Pilgrim. And in the comic book, Ramona Flowers shows up. And they're like, "Oh man, is that a new hair color?" And she's like, "I don't know, probably." And there's an asterisk that's like, and then there was like a colored version later. There was an asterisk that literally said this was way funnier in black and white. I feel like Tokyo Ghoul didn't get that it was really funny in black and white. You're like, it's edgy and cool, and you're like, it's kind of, it's a little bit funny.
Like, wouldn't that be cool though if they just had like, even if it was just black and white, but just one color, just red, in the book? Like, how cool of like a storytelling like element that would be, just to have black, white, and then the occasional red when something like really needs to stand out. Or
make the eyes in the Kagune red, like that'd be dope.
Mm-hmm.
That would be dope.
That would like pop.
Okay, so here's something I've been thinking about. So a couple weeks ago, we did a podcast. Well, it was a little while ago now. We did a podcast on the Umbrella Academy, and that is something that I'd watched the show first, and then I read the comic, and I really enjoyed it. Where T and Dallas, they just read the comic, and they absolutely hated it. And so going back now,
absolutely is a strong word.
Okay,
as hated, but we weren't.
Yeah, you guys bashed it pretty hard though.
JP felt attacked.
But now, Dallas, you started watching the Umbrella Academy, right? And I don't know, how has that changed your perspective on the Umbrella Academy?
I would like the book better in hindsight because I went and watched the show, and the show was like, man, that book is really interesting, but has terrible characters and pacing. Let's make those characters really, really interesting and up to pacing a little bit. And I went, wow, that's so neat. And so if I went back and read the story, the comic again, they're different enough that I feel like I would really love the comic based on my experience with the show.
Yeah.
To answer your question.
And that is what I don't know. This is what I'm curious about. Like, I've read the manga for Tokyo Ghoul now. I feel like it would probably make a good anime, and I've heard great things about the anime. So I wonder if that might be the same case here. Because I have not been really that impressed with the manga, but I don't know if it's just better in a different format.
I also wonder about that because, the second half, when they're introducing just so much stuff, you're just kind of like, I feel like I understand 75% of what's going on in each page. And like page after page, you begin to worry, like, I think I might be missing stuff. And I wonder if it was just kind of like slowed down a little bit and I had more visual connections with like, okay, this is this person's name and I've heard it a few times. And I wonder if it would stick better and work better.
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, for such an action-heavy manga, like George was saying, action was portrayed so poorly. And I feel like, in all honesty, if you could just put that into the anime, where I can watch the action and it unfolds in a more pleasing way, I'll bump up my enjoyment of the story 2 or 3 times. Like, it's not that I really need that action, it's just that it's such a central part of this storyline that it really took away from it to do it poorly.
Yeah, that's what I hypothesized. Like, I feel like I'd enjoy it more as the anime than I did the manga.
You can go and watch it and let us know. I'm not watching it.
Fine.
Well, what did you guys think of the characters? Because I thought like the characters were super well designed and interesting.
I would super agree. I thought everybody looked really unique. Everybody looked really cool. Again, while it was super boring to be told all the different kinds of Kagune, it was really cool to see all the different kinds of Kagune, Like when a new one popped out, I was like, oh, dope. That's pretty cool. And it was even cool over the series to watch it go from like amorphous weirdo tendrils to like, this is this type, and just see the variations on that was kind of cool. I thought the character designs were great. I think sometimes the characters fell a little bit on the edgelord side of the scale for me, if that makes sense. Like, I'll get into that in a minute. I will stick with this question first. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts on it is that like I really liked all the ghoul character designs and some of the investigators, but I felt like there was a lot of investigator designs that didn't really stand out enough for me to really notice or really care about them. Like there was investigators who were like, oh, he looks just like a normal guy, so he probably won't be important in the story later on. And then he's important in the story later on. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think the random like kind of looked like a cookie cutter investigator guy was going to really matter all that much. But for the most part, I really liked the character designs. I thought they were cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed most of the main characters. I really liked Kaneki like up until the whole torture thing. I think like after that, I don't know. I feel like George, like I just couldn't really relate to him. He seemed kind of off his rocker a bit. Like he didn't even know what was going on with himself. But like I like the main investigator. I forget what his name is. Like the one that was in a
Amen.
Yeah. I think I felt like he had a cool backstory, being like raised by a ghoul that was like a priest in an orphanage. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a trippy backstory. That's kind of cool. But yeah, a lot of those like kind of side characters, I don't know, they weren't interesting at all, but they would keep like bringing them up, like they were supposed to be interesting and we were supposed to like them. I'm like, no, I don't like them. It's not interesting. Just I don't know, you kill them off or something.
Yeah,
But
and I mean, there were moments like that where you had really dynamic characters. Like the mask creator was super cool. Ken
yeah,
was super cool. The gourmet is super cool. Toka, super cool. And even like a lot of the main investigators were really cool. Like Juzuo, the kid who was like psycho, pretty
Oh,
damn
yeah.
cool. And like both of the Amons were pretty great. The daughter was less cool. I mean, Motto, both of the Mottos.
Motto.
and then Eamon was really cool. But like those are the 4 that I remember, and then there were like 12 others that are like, here are other investigators, like generic brand investigators, and it's like, it's kind of sad that they didn't make them cooler so that you could hold on to them, but it really is neat when they did put the effort into it.
And then there was that one investigator at the very end. Like it mentioned him a couple times throughout the manga, but who is the investigator that fights Kaneki in the very last couple chapters?
Oh, the crazy powerful one that
Yeah, the
like,
crazy
never
powerful
lost?
one.
I
Yeah,
can't
like
remember his name.
I don't remember
Yeah.
his name either, but he just like it brought him up earlier in the story a few times, but I never really felt like the build up. And then he's there, and like I'm like, who the heck are you?
See, it's funny because I did feel build up on that. I was like, they mentioned this guy like 8 times, and they just never bring him up. And then he was finally there, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Ken Kaneki," and you're like, he knows his name, and then he just whoops his trash and stabs him in the head twice.
I
And
kind
then
of felt
he's
there were a lot of times in this manga that I felt like the guy from Guardians of the Galaxy that's like, who? I'm Star-Lord. Who? Like, that's how I felt all the time. They're like, I'm such and such, or that's such and such. I'm like, who? Huh? To interrupt. I think George's about to say something.
No, you're totally good. It was just like, yeah, it was that moment of who are you? Like I remember seeing you once or twice, but why are you killing my main character now? But killing my main character because he comes back as an investigator in the last panel? Question mark? Why is he an investigator?
Like big
Why
old
does he
question
give a
mark.
false name? I thought he was dead. Where did his friend go? Did he really get eaten? Is he gonna come back later? It was ah!
It was a frustrating ending, because I mean I realize it's not the ending, but it was frustrating.
Yeah.
I remember being like 2 chapters from the end and being like, they got a lot to cover in the last little bit because I thought it was supposed to
Yeah.
end there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Even when I talked to Jake about this a couple years ago, and I was like, "What are some good manga?" He's like, "Tokyo Ghoul is great." He's like, "The first series is perfect." He's like, "The second series is really bad," and like, if he thinks the second series is really bad, and he like this, I don't even want to know what goes on in the second series. You know?
That's what everybody tells me about the Hunger Games. I'm like, I didn't really like the first Hunger Games, and they're like, why? And I'm like, the ending wasn't my favorite, and they're like, we have to read the second one. I was like, was it as good? And they're like, no, not nearly as good. And I'm like, there's kind of like a catch-22 here. It's like, do I read something that's worse than the thing that I didn't like to make the bad thing good? I don't know.
So to all our
Yeah.
listeners, just read the first 70 or so chapters until he gets white hair and then stop.
And then the story's over. It's so cool.
It's
You
good.
don't
Very
have
good
to
story.
read the rest. There isn't a podcast holding you hostage. You don't have to say no to other stories that are more interesting.
Plus, we
You can
spoiled
walk
it all
away
for
from
you
this.
anyway.
We read it so you don't have to.
We bore this cross for you, okay?
We ran so you could take a leisurely stroll.
Well, most of us read it for you.
Yeah, I didn't make it. I died on
Dallas
the side of the
abandoned the
road.
cross.
Yo, I made it to chapter 95, and I went, I've got like 5 more hours of this. And I just closed it, and I felt the weight lifted from my shoulders. It was real nice. I do have one thing to say. So I feel like since Jordan Peele stepped on the scene back in like 2018 with Get Out, he made Us, there's been sort of this like horror renaissance of the last couple years. I don't know if you guys participate in this community, y'all, but basically they've said like jump scares and just like grotesque things aren't interesting. Like it needs to be psychologically compelling. You need to have an interesting story. Creep us out in like a cool way. Don't just like make us feel icky. And I feel like there have been a lot of really great properties that have stepped up to the plate and just knocked it out of the park on this front, you know? And I was so excited to read Tokyo Ghoul because I have learned to.
We lost him.
He learned something.
I think he learned to love horror.
I think so too.
I'll just talk as Dallas. I have learned to love horror, and so I was really looking forward to this in a manga. and then it really didn't fit my expectations. It had like these big edgy things, but it was just the same thing, just kind of like jump scares and old-fashioned things. And I realized this was made in like 2006 or 2007. I've got no idea if that was when it was made. And I don't know, Dallas maybe knows. But, I just had higher hopes for things.
That was fun. That
Oh.
was fun.
Did you catch that?
Thank you.
I'm glad
I
that
didn't want to cut you off there. That's great.
It was funny because you didn't move at all for us.
You're
and
just
I was like,
frozen.
guess I'm just going to keep going. As Dallas.
Yeah, you're spot on. Basically, I was like, I've read some good Japanese horror. I read Uzumaki. I've read No Longer Human. And basically, I've read Junji Ito. And it's really good, And so I was like, oh, man. Tokyo Ghoul is like put on the bookshelves next to these things as like Japanese horror. I was like, I bet it's going to be so good. And I was like, I'm really ready to like itch that horror scratch for me. And I read it and I was like, I guess they cut off his toes. And mostly just, it seems like My Chemical Romance should have been playing in the background of this entire thing. And I like My Chemical Romance, but like, you're not edgy, My Chemical Romance. I feel like they were like, oh, let's put on some eyeliner and bleach my hair, and now I am punk. Punk as hell. Punk as funk. And I just, it wasn't good horror. It was a bunch of jump scares and gore.
It's funny that you bring that up because, like, the biggest demographic outside of our roommate Jacob that I've seen that loves this show is like 16-year-old girls who like want an edgy thing. And I'm just kind of like, it surprised me how many people were like, Tokyo Ghoul, it's about people eating each other. And then I'm like, you are hardly a tween anymore. And just trying to be on the edgy side. And so I feel like it's almost more appealing to kind of like younger audiences.
Yeah. And
honestly, I mean, seriously, in early high school, Ooh. Thank goodness this wasn't something we liked, so all these audio difficulties don't really bother me that much.
I love how we're getting like this delayed thing of Dallas and JP, and George and I are here sitting like, welcome to real time. They're getting sucked into the wormhole from Interstellar and like getting slowed down and sped up, and George and I are like, wow, we can watch from the outside.
Yeah, we're just outside of the time bubble.
That's how I wish I was with Tokyo Ghoul. I wish I could have just watched it and read it.
Yeah.
Wish I could have just sat outside.
I don't know. Do you guys have anything else to say about this comic? If I liked it, I think I would have more to say about it, but I'm just like disappointed and feel like I kind of wasted some time.
Disappointed!
Sorry, Jacob, we don't like it.
I'm trying to find good things to say about it.
Here's the thing, like, it had so much potential, and there were a lot of really good things about it, and I feel like that's one of the reasons we're so hard on it. Because, like, if it was just trash, it'd be like, it was kind of just trash. I don't really know if there's redeeming any trash, but it does inspire, like, a lot of conversation, and we can talk about, like, look at these characters that aren't so good, because we had some really good ones.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the last season of Game of Thrones. Like, the last season of Game of Thrones wouldn't have stung so bad if the rest of Game of Thrones was like the last season of Game of Thrones, I kind of feel like that's Tokyo Ghoul. Like, the second half wouldn't have stung so bad if the first half wasn't good.
I wonder for how long Game of Thrones will be the example for something great gone wrong right at the very end.
Until they make Game of Thrones Brotherhood.
Like, I don't know how you're going to recover from that, because it was like the best thing on television to the most disappointing. Can you, like, I want to, like, rank order disappointments in my life, and, like, that one's, like, up near the top. And probably the very top of any sort of media disappointment.
I mean, even, like, for my dad, like, his list of disappointments is, like, me, Game of Thrones, So, like, it's up there.
Yeah. The writer of Tokyo Ghoul is just Icarus, and he flew too close to the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, I did enjoy it at times, like, especially, like, through the first 70 chapters or so. So, like, I mean, give it a shot. Maybe you'll enjoy it. Maybe you won't want to gouge your eyes out afterwards. But, like,
maybe you're a teen girl.
I mean, Dallas did it too. Yeah.
How much of our demographic is tween girls?
Oof, probably not much. They're like, I want to hear a bunch of 23-year-olds.
We don't have a demographic. We're shouting into the void. Each of us
All-
will watch this.
To all 2 listeners that made it to this part of the podcast, we love
Shout
you.
out to our relatives and one random real follower.
Oh boy.
Oh.
Well, we could toss out some mangoes.
Ratings.
Oof.
Go for it.
Okay. This was a bright, juicy orange mango, but then you find out it's got a worm inside, and it's just like putrid on the inside. I mean, it looked so delicious until you really bit into it. That's my mango rating.
My mango was similarly really beautiful, and then I bit into it, and the pit was a human finger, and then the finger opened its mouth, and it explained the 1,600 different parts of a mango to me until I never wanted to eat a mango again. It also told me about all the other mangoes around that I similarly didn't care about. And their name was like Speeve or something. And they all looked like regular mangoes, but it assured me they were important and they'd come up later in the story. That's how my mango was.
I think my mango was someone was trying to sell me a black mango and convince me it was mango colored. That's how I feel.
And see, for me, it's like a coffee flavored mango, where you're like, this is really intriguing at inception, but then like the execution just didn't turn out and it didn't deliver and it left you unsatisfied.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah. So, thank goodness Jacob wasn't here to hear us rag on his thing.
I'm actually just a little bit worried that he'll
I
watch
guess
it.
he was an edgy 16.
We may not have Jacob on the show again.
JP, do you want to introduce what we're watching, what we're reading next time? And you're stepping up to the chopping block, man. If it sucks too, this is how mean we're gonna be.
All right, that's fair. Well, it's not even technically a manga. It's a webtoon called Tower of God. So it kind of falls in the same similar category. But I've read a couple. I think it's still ongoing, but it's got several hundred chapters. I'm not sure exactly how far we'll get into
I'm not
it.
reading.
But I enjoyed it
School starting.
significantly more than Tokyo Ghoul. Yeah, we'll figure out a good stopping point to read through. But they recently just started an anime, and I think they did like the first season of that. I don't know. I liked it. We'll see what everyone else thinks, and I might also be bumped off the podcast if it's not good.
It just ends up being just George on the podcast reading My Hero Academia every week.
It's just
It's the only thing that's not
MHA moments of
controversial.
George.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, if you want, you can also read Tower of God and check it out, and also see what you think when we talk about it next time.
Yeah, but if you enjoy this content, please follow us over on Mango Manga Man on Twitter. George is the primary contributor to that account, and he's doing a great job. Funny as heck. If you just like regular old manga content, we kind of live tweet what we're reading at the time. If you're interested in Western comics, superheroes, the indie scene, go follow us over on our other podcast, DTR Comics, where we more often than not like what we read. I feel like we've been in a little bit of a bitchy mood lately. I swear we like this stuff. Maybe it's just too hot in the world. But you can follow us over on DTR Comics. And I don't know. You can follow us personally if you track us down. It wouldn't be that hard. Go to DTR Manga Man and see who the 4 people they follow are.
Mm-hmm. Or the only people who like the posts.
Also that. Again, shouting into a void. I just pitched our Twitter to the only people that follow our Twitter, but
maybe one day this is gonna get big.
People are gonna go back and be like, man, those first episodes were weird.
Yeah.
They had all these technical difficulties. They read Tokyo Ghoul like tween girls.
Tokyo Ghoul wasn't that fun, but trashing about it has been pretty fun.
Yeah.
I had a good time. This was cathartic.
I'm telling
This
you,
was
we
cathartic. I was worried
need
I'd be
Science 3000 comic edition.
Is this therapy? Has our hair gotten any lighter from?
Yeah, hey, is our hair lighter? We've been tortured. Oh man, I feel so powerful. I was brought to the edge of death so many times.
Well.
Thank you, everybody. This has been Men Manga Mongos, and we will see you next month.
All right.
All right.